So this paragraph is from the author's note at the beginning. It highlights several of the major themes in the novel. Some important words are evanescence, which means rapid fading from sight or memory, and eluctable, which means inevitable. We see the ideas of impermanence especially in the prologue and epilogue of the book. For instance, at the beginning of the book, Burnham thinks to himself, Burnham and Millet were among the few builders of the fair still alive. So many others had gone. Olmsted and Codman, McKim, Hunt, Atwood, mysteriously, and that initial loss which Burnham still found difficult to comprehend. Soon no one would remain, and the fair would cease to exist as a living memory in anyone's brain. But we also see permanence. The people who dreamed big and engaged in the impossible formed legacies that made their stories permanent. The World Fair had a lasting impression, most notably in how it, quote, changed the way Americans perceived their cities and their architects. Larson writes on page 373, the fair taught men and women, steeped only in the necessary, to see that cities did not have to be dark, soiled, and unsafe bastions of the strictly pragmatic. They could also be beautiful. On the other hand, of permanence, the people who engaged in the manufacture of sorrow created a name for themselves, though their legacies are infamous. So here we see a contrast between the two main characters, one good, one evil. Similarly, there is a white city, the World Fair, and a black city, Chicago, outside of the fair. However, the distinction between black and white isn't all that clear. Larson shows that through the World Fair being the common means for Burnham to exert his positive influence and Holmes to exert his bad influence, the good and evil have a lot to do with one another. Even though Holmes talks about being born a murderer, the circumstances of the World Fair shaped his identity as a serial killer by giving him an opportunity. Again, this passage shows how good and evil are intertwined through comparing and contrasting the black and white cities, much like how Larson intertwines the storylines of Daniel Burnham and H.H. Holmes. So throughout the book, we see Larson comparing H.H. Holmes and Daniel Burnham. Even though it appears the two have nothing in common, Larson makes note of how they both have blue eyes, which reflects their charisma. For instance, he describes Holmes as being good with conversation, which caused all the women to have an immediate obsession with him. Burnham's charisma helps him in business affairs, while Holmes's charisma helps him in deflecting suspicion and attracting girls. Both are unusually adept at their chosen skills, and both are driven by, quote, a deep current of ambition. Civic pride and a desire to prove himself were Burnham's motives, while Holmes's motives were more of killing for the fun of it and to feel powerful. They are both insane. Burnham's insanity in pursuing the seemingly impossible World's Fair, and Holmes's insanity in simply killing for the sake of it. These distinctions and similarities in insanity, charisma, and ambition show how people can use their assets in different ways, going back to the author's note of how some people choose to fill their time with engaging the impossible or the manufacture of sorrow.